want to start by saying, I think one of the really important ideas of being a field is to have an understanding of the context in which you're working, and to understand that your own foundation or corporation's efforts don't take place in isolation, but that they're part of something much bigger. And to know that you have an obligation, if you want to use your resources wisely, to see how your efforts connect with those of a wider field, to think hard about how you can leverage the efforts of others in your field, and to try to assure that the collective impact of your giving is far greater than the sum of the parts. It's been a year that's presented unprecedented challenges as endowments have shrunk, as communities are reeling with hardship. It's a year that's been presented with unprecedented opportunities as we contemplate a federal role in education that we've never seen in history, as momentum coalesces around a set of reforms, and as we're building our collective understanding as a field that we need to do something far greater than what we've done to date if we're to ensure America's place in the world in the future. Looking first to the question of funding and what's happened, it's been a difficult year. Our benchmarking study found that about 60% of you had cuts to your grant making in 2009. And for 22% of you, your cuts were more than 20% of your grants budget versus the previous year. Those are deep and difficult cuts. And I've had a number of conversations with you over the year, in the hallways here, as we've tried to understand how you're responding to those cuts, and as you wrestle with the very, very difficult decisions you've had to make. At the same time, 26% of the members of GFE reported that there had been no change in their grant-making budgets this year. And a rather surprising 14% actually increased their grant making. I think the kind of boldness and step forward of increasing grant making at a time of reductions is a really heroic decision that some funders have made, both to try to address some of the widespread community needs and to take advantage of this historic moment of opportunity. In terms of how you made those cuts and the kinds of decisions that you made, we heard that nearly half of you kept your grant size constant, but that you reduced the number of grants you've made. To me, that really says that we're achieving greater focus as a field. Rather than saying we'll just thin the soup, do a little bit less for everyone, it's really been a time where funders are starting to say, we need to make some hard choices. We need to decide where we're going to place our bets. And then when we do, we're going to try to bet in a way that we think they're going to win. We also know that philanthropy has been taking cuts at home, and that you've recognized the urgency of getting those dollars out into communities, into improving education systems. So 3/4 of you have taken administrative cuts. I know a number of foundations that have made personnel changes, staffing reductions. Many of you have cut back your travel and administrative budgets. There are many ways that people are working very hard to ensure that as many of those dollars as possible are going out to communities, and I think people have responded with great courage and commitment during these challenging times. We also learned through our survey some trends about how you're adjusting your strategies in these times. One of the most important things that we learned, and that's not surprising but very affirming, is that you are recognizing the power of partnership. 91% of the education grant makers in our survey are collaborating with other funders as one of the key ways that you're adjusting to these challenging times. And you're also looking to help your grantees collaborate with one another to really leverage the collective impact of your giving. And many of you have said that this is an area where you're going to place even greater emphasis going forward. And I'll say again that that direction is one that has been reflected in the hallways and in the conversations here throughout the conference. I've heard many, many more conversations where people are talking about how they're investing, exploring how that intersects with other funders' work, and really trying to think how to use those funds as smartly as possible to avoid some of the isolation and fragmentation that our field has been accused of exhibiting in the past. Another way that folks have been responding is to recognize the vital role that public policy plays in improving educational outcomes. We've long acknowledged that philanthropic resources are dwarfed by the public expenditures in our education systems, whether you're looking at pre-K, K-12, out-of-school time, workforce, higher education. 2/3 of GFE's members are investing in some way in influencing public policy, whether that's through research, through advocacy, through helping think through the implementation, and many of you are recognizing the very important roles that you must play in working with our public officials to improve our education systems. Philanthropy cannot do this alone with its resources. A third area, and I think this speaks again to Foundation's commitment to these times, is that many of you are providing general operating support to your grantees and addressing some of the core infrastructure needs that your grantees are struggling with during these difficult times. And finally, there's been a widespread recognition of hope and opportunity, even at a time that's marked by such incredible challenge. So many people talked about the potential for partnership, about the excitement about the Race to the Top funds and the I3 fund, about ways that you're helping your grantees see these new possibilities and incorporate it into their work and take advantage and leverage and sustain those investments. So while it's a time of retrenchment, it's also a time for innovation, for partnership, for growth. We were challenged yesterday by Jeff Canada, and we're going to be challenged more in a few minutes by Secretary Duncan, that it's time to step up our game, that as hard as we've worked, that as much as we've invested, it's not enough. I think there has been a great excitement here as we recognize this historic opportunity to transform our nation's education systems, that rather than simply continuing to decry the declining performance of American students compared with their peers internationally, that we see a chance to put in place the far-reaching changes that are needed to truly transform our education systems. And that's why we're here all together, and that's why we're charging you to make no small plans. At the end of the day, we're asking ourselves, what do we owe the field? And together, what do all of us owe our children?